I inherited the old house on the edge of Gable Marsh without warning, or rather, my family inherited it, and by default, I ended up moving into the small, musty bedroom upstairs, staring out at the bleak pond every night. It used to belong to my grandfather, whom I barely knew. His health had deteriorated over the last few years, and eventually he passed, leaving a cluster of crumbling buildings and swampy land to my father. With the bills piling up back in the city, my parents decided the best course of action was to move to the countryside, fix the place up, and see if we could either make a living off the land or sell it for a decent price. I was 16, old enough to form my own opinions, but still forced to go where my parents dragged me. The idea of living on a remote farm wasn't exactly thrilling. My first sight of Gable Marsh came on a grey, drizzly afternoon, a low sky pressing down on acres of mud and reeds, with a ramshackle house in the middle, its windows dark as eyes. My father parked the loaded truck with a sigh. My mother hopped out to inspect the porch. I stood by the passenger door, wondering how long we'd last before going crazy from the isolation and the smell of stagnant water. By dusk on that first day, we had most of the boxes inside. I had lugged my stuff to the second floor. The walls up there were covered in peeling floral wallpaper stained from decades of humidity. My new bedroom contained only a twin bed, a dusty nightstand, and a dresser that creaked if I so much as looked at it. The window overlooked the back pasture and, worse, the wide, scummy pond that adjoined a deeper section of swampy woods known locally as the Sinking Forest. At the far edge of the water grew a tangled mass of cypress and oak, their roots disappearing into muddy sinkholes. I didn't think much of it at first. I was too busy lamenting my new life. But that night, as the frogs croaked and insects buzzed, I found it impossible to sleep. The humid air clung to me. When I finally drifted off, I dreamt of slurping sounds and swirling black water. My grandfather's old study was on the first floor, a cramped side room stuffed with antique furniture. A broad oak desk dominated the space, its surface covered in dusty papers, books, and broken pencils. My father said we could clear it out or keep what we liked. There was too much junk to haul back and forth. A few days after moving in, while my parents were busy with the roof repair, I ventured into that study, hoping to find something interesting or at least rummage for a clue as to who my grandfather had really been. I remembered him only as a silent old man who rarely visited us in the city, and when he did, he stared at me with watery eyes as if he saw something he didn't like. The desk drawers were locked, but the lock was old and flimsy. With a little prying, I popped the top drawer open. Inside lay a scattering of photographs, a tarnished pocket watch, and a small battered notebook with a worn leather cover. It smelled faintly of mildew. I flipped through it. The handwriting was cramped and spidery, done with a fountain pen that sometimes bled through the pages. At first I thought it might be a log of my grandfather's daily chores or finances, but the earliest entries made me pause. They were dated nearly 40 years ago. August 2. Found signs of missing livestock fresh prints by the water. Not sure if it's coyotes or something else. Betty says she's hearing strange noises in the night. August 7. The cows won't go near the pond. That place has a sour reek. Bubbles keep rising, and sometimes there's a splash like something big moving under the water. August 10th. Lost another goat. Dragged straight into the swamp, only a few tufts of fur left. I sat watch last night. Around 2 a.m., the water started bubbling, deeper than a gator or catfish. Something big is in there. My mouth went dry. I read on, entranced. The next few entries described more disappearances, chickens, a calf, even a neighbor's hunting dog. My grandfather became convinced a beast lived in the swamp, lurking in the muddy water. He called it the Marsh Fiend in one entry, but that name was crossed out, replaced by expletives. He wrote about how it came ashore silently, leaving only watery tracks behind. September 3rd. It hunts at night, leaves no trace except for churned mud. If not for that, I'd think I was losing my mind. September 12th. The neighbor's boy is missing. They found footprints near the water, big footprints. Not human. Folks around here are whispering about the sinking forest, about something older than memory. I've never believed in such tales, but I can't deny what I've seen. My heart pounded. The further I read, the darker his words became. He and a few neighbors started keeping watch. They found half-eaten remains of animals in the shallows. They attempted to fortify fences. They even fired shotguns into the water late at night, hoping to scare off whatever was there. The second to last page described a harrowing night, September 22nd. We chased it. We saw it in the moonlight, black as tar, low to the ground but massive. It slipped back into the swamp before we could shoot. It leaves prints like giant hands, 5 long claws, slick with algae. God help us. Then the final entry chilled me most of all. September 23rd. I've seen it. Giant hands, slick and black. If I disappear, it got me too. There was no farewell, no additional note. Just that line, scrawled hurriedly, as if he wrote it moments before something terrible happened. But my grandfather hadn't disappeared. He'd lived on for decades after. So maybe he'd vanquished the creature. Or maybe the diary was a record of a time he nearly lost his mind. Nevertheless, my chest felt tight. Staring out the study window, I could see the edge of the pond glimmering with midday sunlight. A single heron stood in the shallows, beak poised to catch a fish. The water looked calm, ordinary. But the diary told a different story, one that stoked a quiet fear in me. I tucked the notebook under my shirt, not quite ready to share it with my parents. They won't believe me anyway, I thought. Or they'd dismiss it as an old man's superstition. But I couldn't ignore the sense of foreboding that settled over me. Something about that swamp felt alive, hungry. Days passed in a blur of farm chores and half-hearted attempts at turning the place livable. My father hammered new boards onto the porch. My mother scrubbed floors. I cleared debris from the barn, discovering termite-riddled beams and rusted farming tools. Occasionally, the local mail carrier would show up, and we might chat for a minute. But that was the extent of social interaction. Each evening I'd go to bed exhausted, only to toss and turn amid the hot, sticky night air. The tree frogs never stopped chirping, and the crickets formed a droning chorus that seeped into my dreams. On the 4th night after I'd read the diary, I woke around midnight, my throat dry. I went downstairs to get water from the kitchen. On my way back, I glanced out the window that faced the back pasture. Under the moonlight, the pond looked eerily bright, as though it reflected more than just lunar light. Almost a faint glow from below tinted a sickly green. The wind was still. The night air had an uncanny hush, making me all the more aware of my own breathing. Then I saw it, a disturbance in the water near the far bank, close to the line of swamp trees. It was subtle, just a ripple, but it churned outward, spreading in slow circles. I stared, transfixed. Probably a gator, I told myself. We were in the south, after all. Yet something about the shape of the ripple made my heart beat faster. It wasn't wide enough for a gator's body, more like a hand dragging the surface. I stood there, pressed to the window, waiting for another sign. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then a deep, hollow glub broke the silence, a heavy bubble of gas or something exhaling. The water frothed, and I heard what might have been a soft hiss. I backed away, heart pounding. Maybe it was an alligator, rummaging in the mud. Yet the diary's words reverberated in my mind. Giant hands, slick and black. I didn't sleep much the rest of that night. The next morning I was out in the yard, helping clear branches from a fallen tree, when I noticed that none of the local wildlife seemed inclined to approach the pond. Birds circled overhead but rarely landed near it. The cattle from the neighboring farm grazed far from the water's edge, even though the grass near the pond was greener. It reminded me of how the diary mentioned livestock refusing to drink from the water. I pushed the thought aside and busied myself with chores. That evening, I paced around my room, uncertain whether to tell my parents about what I'd seen or about the diary. The logical side of me said it was all nonsense. My father would mock the idea, or worse, get angry for stirring up pointless fear. My mother would probably pat my head and laugh it off, saying, "Sweetheart, that's just the wind over the water." Even so, a knot of tension built in my stomach, telling me there was more truth in the diary than anyone wanted to admit. After another night of poor sleep, the next day arrived bleak and rainy. Clouds hung low over the horizon, and a fine drizzle turned the yard into mud. Thunder grumbled in the distance. I ended up in the barn, rummaging through a dusty collection of old junk, cracked clay pots, rotted rope, and a broken rifle. Among these items, I found a crate stuffed with newspaper clippings and a few photos. Most were water damaged, but I picked through them carefully. A headline caught my eye. "Local boy missing near marsh," dated from about 40 years ago, the same time frame as the diary entries. The article was smudged, but I could read a few lines referencing how the search party found only footprints leading into the muck, with no sign of the boy's body. Another clipping mentioned 2 missing dogs. It matched what the diary said. My grandfather had known about these disappearances, had tried to hunt down the culprit or creature. Yet the official record gave no supernatural explanation. Just speculation about drowning in a sinkhole or attacked by alligators. I folded the article and kept it in my pocket. That night the storm intensified. Lightning lit up the sky, thunder rattled the windows, rain hammered the roof, forming rivulets of water that rushed into the ditches. I sat in the living room with my parents, who were reading by lamplight. I pretended to do homework, though school was still on break. I was trying to keep up with assigned summer reading. But my mind couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting to the window. Would the creature show itself tonight in the storm? Sure enough, around 10 p.m., the lights flickered. My mother frowned, worried about a power outage. The wind howled. "I'll check the circuit breaker," my father said, heading toward the back door. He flipped on the porch light, peered outside, and swore. "Damn it! The yard is flooding." I looked past him, saw water pooling in the grass. The ground was already saturated. The pond was likely to spill over. A flash of lightning illuminated the battered old fence line, and beyond that, the swamp. For a split second, I thought I saw a ripple in the pond, a shape on the surface. Then everything went dark. The power died. My mother gasped in the sudden blackness, and my father said, "Stay calm, I'll grab a flashlight." I fumbled for my phone, turned on its weak LED. The thunder roared overhead, closer now. My father rummaged in a closet for an emergency lantern. When he switched it on, we had a dim glow in the living room, enough to see each other's faces. My mother looked anxious. The wind battered the house. Then, amidst the drumming of the rain, I heard a deep bubble, like thick mud boiling. It was faint, yet distinct. It came from outside, near the back of the property, near the pond. My stomach twisted. "What's that?" I asked. My father frowned, tilting his head. "Probably the drainage ditch," he said. But I could hear it again, heavier this time. Bubbles rising from deep water, accompanied by a low, sucking noise, like someone stirring a pot of thick stew. "What if the pond's overflowing?" my mother asked. She looked out the window, but the sheets of rain made it impossible to see more than a few yards. Another flash of lightning revealed flickering images, the yard shimmering under water, the fence half submerged, and something large moving in the pond. I wasn't sure if it was a wave or a shape. It vanished when darkness returned. My father grabbed a coat. "I'll check the flood levels," he said. "This place might flood worse than I realized. We've got to see if we can redirect some of the water." "No!" The word burst from my lips before I could stop it. Both my parents stared at me. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Why not?" she asked, confused. I couldn't tell them about the beast. They'd never believe me, or they'd laugh. My father scowled. "I'll be fine. I'm just stepping onto the porch. I'm not going all the way out there." I swallowed hard. "Okay," I mumbled, stepping aside. He donned a raincoat, slipped outside, leaving the door ajar. Water pelted the porch roof. I hovered near the door, shining my phone flashlight onto the wet boards. My father walked to the porch rail, squinting into the storm. Another brilliant flash of lightning lit the scene. I saw the pond in the distance, roiling, water surging over the grassy bank. The swirl of current looked unnatural, like a whirlpool forming. My father muttered something, stepping down the porch steps to get a better look. Rain drenched him immediately. A wave of fear surged in me. If that thing were out there, could it sense him? Just then the bubble noise returned, loud enough that even he heard it. He spun around, shining his own flashlight, pointing it at the swirling pond. "What the hell?" I heard him say, half to himself, half to me. I called out, "Dad, get back in here." My voice cracked with alarm. He hesitated, then complied, stepping back onto the porch. I saw the confusion etched on his face. "I never heard anything like that before," he said. "It's like the water is alive." He came inside, dripping water everywhere. My mother fetched towels. The wind rattled the windows again. Thunder shook the house, and we stood in tense silence, listening to that distant glub, glub, glub. Finally, the storm lessened, and the bubble sounds faded. We spent a sleepless night in candlelight until the power returned at dawn. The next morning, the storm clouds drifted away, leaving a heavy mist over the soggy pasture. My father surveyed the flood damage. The pond had overflowed slightly, but it receded during the night. No major harm done, except a few boards from the fence were torn loose and drifted near the swamp's edge. I wanted to shout at him. It wasn't just the storm. There's something out there. Instead, I hovered near the door, scanning the muddy yard. Large footprints or handprints were nowhere to be seen, but the muck was churned up in odd patterns, as if something big had rolled across the ground. I glimpsed lumps of wet algae or pondweed near the fence. My father just assumed it washed up during the night. Later that afternoon, I sneaked away to the old study and took out my grandfather's diary again, rereading the final pages. He'd mentioned that even after they tried to chase it off with guns, the beast kept dragging animals away. The only respite came after a particularly violent confrontation where two neighbors allegedly shot it multiple times. Then, for reasons unknown, the abduction stopped. Could it have been wounded? Or driven deeper into the swamp, forced to hibernate? My grandfather never specified. All I knew was that eventually, the diary ended. He carried on with his life until old age. But if the creature had simply been dormant, the recent storms and floods might have awakened it once more. My heart pounded as I connected these dots. I remembered that final ominous line, "If I disappear, it got me too." For decades, the beast left my grandfather alone, presumably. But now it seemed to be stirring again. Unable to quell my curiosity and dread, I found myself standing in my bedroom that evening, peering out the window at the pond. The sky was clear and moonlit. A faint sheen of fog draped the water. My parents were already asleep, exhausted from the stressful night before. I should have been asleep too, but rest was impossible. Midnight drifted past. I lost track of time, hypnotized by the moonlight shimmering on the pond. Around 1 a.m., I saw something move among the reeds on the far bank, where the swamp forest began, a shape rippling in the haze. My pulse quickened. The shape slipped below the water's surface without a sound, leaving a few subtle rings behind. I felt an insane urge to go outside to see for myself. Fear warred with curiosity. In the end, curiosity won out. I left my bedroom, carefully tiptoed down the stairs and slid into my boots and coat. Opening the back door as quietly as I could, I stepped into the cool night air. My breath fogged in front of me. The grass squished underfoot, still sodden from the recent storm. I took a flashlight, but I kept it off, not wanting to draw attention. A faint breeze carried the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves. Crickets chirped, but their song felt subdued, like they too sensed something lurking. Closer to the pond, the ground became softer, spongy with each step. The water's surface lay still, reflecting the moon's pale glow. My heart hammered. I was sure something was watching me from beneath. Each swirl of the reflection made me jump. But for a minute or two, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere in the sinking forest, a low groan echoed a deep, resonant sound that might have been a bullfrog if not for its sheer volume. I froze. The water rippled near the opposite bank, then stilled. My mind conjured images of giant black hands reaching up from the depths. I decided this was a terrible idea and was about to turn back, when I heard a hiss in the reeds, a rustling, like a large body shifting in shallow water. I flicked the flashlight on and aimed it across the pond, though the beam only illuminated thick cattails and branches. Another rustle, closer this time, made my skin crawl. Something was there. Something big. Without waiting to see more, I spun on my heel and dashed back to the house, nearly slipping on the wet grass. Once inside, I locked the door, chest heaving. I flicked off the flashlight and slumped against the wall. Adrenaline spiked through me so powerfully that I didn't sleep for hours. The next morning, I persuaded my father to let me walk to the local supply store in the nearby town, an excuse to buy some nails or something. In truth, I needed to talk to anyone about the swamp. He gave me a few dollars and said, "Knock yourself out. We need more nails anyway." It was a long, dusty road to that little cluster of shops, but I didn't mind. The store's sign read, "Butler's Hardware and More." It was run by an older man named Gus, who seemed friendly enough when I walked in. The place smelled of sawdust and motor oil. I brought a small basket of nails, some rope, and a couple of other odds and ends to the register. Gus rang them up, glancing at me. "You're one of the new folks living at old Gable Marsh, aren't you?" I nodded, somewhat self-conscious. "Yes, sir. Moved in a few weeks ago." His brow furrowed with mild concern. "That place always gave me the willies. Good farmland if you can tame the swamp, but folks around here know better than to build too close to that water." I swallowed. "Yeah, the swamp's, kind of creepy." I tried to sound casual. "Ever hear any stories about weird things out there? Like missing animals or sinkholes that swallow stuff?" He gave a humorless chuckle. "Plenty of that. The sinking forest is older than old. People say there's pockets of quicksand, sinkholes, gators, you name it. Could be easy to disappear if you're not careful." I took a deep breath, deciding to risk sounding ridiculous. "My grandfather used to own that land. I found his journal he wrote about, seeing something in the swamp. Something that dragged animals under." Gus's eyes narrowed. "I heard rumors. Decades back, some local families lost livestock. There was talk about a big creature. Some folks called it a swamp devil. Most wrote it off as an alligator or a black bear with mange. But I remember hearing about folks claiming to see giant tracks. Big hands, they said. Huh, probably just tall tales. But out there," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Out there you never know." A chill ran through me. "So, no one ever found out exactly what it was." He shrugged. "The disappearances seemed to stop eventually. People moved away or started being more cautious, I guess. Some say Old Man Gable, your grandfather, led a group that shot it. Others say it just sank back into the muck. Hard to separate fact from legend. I paid for the items with shaking hands." Gus offered a half smile. "You be careful, kid. The swamp can be real unforgiving. Tell your folks if you see anything strange, you hear?" I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. After that conversation, any lingering hope I had that my grandfather's diary was a mere fantasy vanished. The local legend corroborated it. Something terrifying once prowled those waters, and now it might be active again. The walk back home felt longer. The late afternoon sun beat down on the muddy road, raising a steamy haze from the puddles. Frogs croaked in the ditches. Dragonflies buzzed. The everyday sights of the countryside felt tainted by the knowledge of what lurked in the swamp. When I arrived, my father was on the porch, hammering a loose plank. "Took you long enough," he grumbled. "It's almost sundown." "Yeah," I mumbled, heading inside. I felt uneasy. The day was bright, but I couldn't stop picturing the muddy pond at night or the shapes slithering through reeds. I found my mother in the kitchen, humming to herself as she tested the new oven. She was trying to keep a sense of normalcy despite the strangeness of our new environment. After dinner, I was about to retreat to my room when I heard the phone ring. My father answered it, exchanged a few words, and sighed. When he hung up, he looked at me grimly. That was Mr. Thompson from up the road. One of his calves went missing last night. He asked if we saw anything. My skin prickled. "What did you tell him?" He shrugged. "Told him no, didn't see anything. But I'm not surprised the poor animal got lost in that storm. Could have slipped in the mud. He's going out to search the sinking forest tomorrow with a couple of neighbors." My father paused, scowling. "Just be careful if you wander around, okay? That swamp is dangerous." I simply nodded, not daring to say more. Inside, I knew. It started again. The beast was claiming livestock, just like in my grandfather's diary. Was it only a matter of time before it escalated to people? That night, the tension in the house was palpable. My father kept a shotgun leaning against the wall. Just in case, he told my mother. She rolled her eyes, but I noticed her glance at it nervously. Outside, the wind rustled. The half-moon shone through thin clouds. Around midnight, I jolted awake to a distant roar and inhuman cry that reverberated through the humid air. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I scrambled from my bed to the window, peering out. The yard lay in gloom, the pond barely visible beyond. But I could hear splashing, a frantic thrashing sound somewhere near the water. I grabbed my flashlight, rushed downstairs. My father met me in the hallway, eyes wide, shotgun in hand. My mother hovered behind him, her expression frightened. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. We stepped onto the porch together, the wooden boards creaking. The thrashing continued, accompanied by low, guttural moans. "Stay here," my father ordered, motioning for me to remain. He descended the porch steps, the flashlight trembling in his grip. I crept after him anyway, ignoring his glare. My mother, too afraid to let him go alone, followed. So the three of us advanced toward the pond. We didn't have to go far. Near the fence line, the ground was torn up, mud flung everywhere. My father's flashlight beam revealed clumps of fur, a young calf's body half submerged in the murky water. The poor creature was already limp, only its hindquarters visible. The water near it churned violently, as if something beneath was yanking it down. Bubbles and foam roiled. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father raised the shotgun, shouting, "Hey, get out of there!" He fired a warning shot into the air, the blast echoing across the marsh. The thrashing paused for a moment. Then a shape rose from the water, a silhouette that made my blood run cold. At first it looked like a massive hump or bulk, slick with mud and algae glistening in the flashlight's glare. Then, as it shifted, I caught a glimpse of a limb, a broad, hand-like appendage with elongated fingers that ended in ragged claws. The entire thing was black and wet, shining like an oil slick. It slapped the water, sending a splash our way. My father aimed the gun, but the creature sank swiftly into the pond, dragging the calf with it. The water frothed, then settled into ominous bubbles. A stench of rotting vegetation wafted into the air. My parents stared, horrified. I felt numb shock creeping through me. We had all seen it. There was no denying it now. It's... My mother stammered, unable to finish. My father lowered the shotgun, his hands shaking. "I don't know," he murmured. "But it killed that calf. God help us, that was real." We backed away from the water, returning to the house in a daze. Once inside, we locked the doors. My mother trembled as she sank into a kitchen chair. My father paced, holding the shotgun like a lifeline. Finally, he turned to me. "Son, do you know anything about this?" The question was abrupt, but I realized he'd noticed my earlier anxiety, my reluctance to go near the swamp, my mention of weird noises. He wasn't angry, just desperate. So I told them everything about the diary, about the local legends, about how Grandpa had once hunted this thing. My father's face drained of color. My mother seemed on the verge of tears. "We have to leave," she said. "We can't stay here with that thing out there." But my father grimaced. "We've sunk so much money into this place, we can't just cut and run without a plan. Besides, who'd buy a property with a monster in the swamp?" My mother shook her head. Better a loss of money than our lives. Their argument continued, but eventually my father insisted he'd speak with the neighbors, maybe call the authorities or wildlife services. What would we even tell them? That a giant black-handed beast was eating cattle. We slept fitfully, barricading ourselves in the house while the swamp outside gurgled and bubbled with secrets in the dark. The following day my father called the local sheriff, who listened skeptically but agreed to send a deputy to investigate potential gator activity. My father also drove to Mr. Thompson's place to explain what had happened. The neighbors were incensed about the calf, demanding action. More than one person offered to grab guns and march into the swamp. They planned a search party for the afternoon. I wanted to join, but my father forbade it, telling me to stay inside with my mother. "We need to keep you safe," he said firmly. "This is too dangerous." I reluctantly agreed, though it felt wrong. If there was a plan to kill the creature, I wanted to see for myself it was gone. Around noon, a small group of men gathered in the yard. Mr. Thompson, my father, a couple of neighbors, and eventually the deputy. They all carried shotguns or hunting rifles, plus flashlights, ropes, and even a few flares. The deputy, a lanky man named Brown, seemed hesitant, but the others insisted. "We can't let this thing keep dragging our livestock away," Mr. Thompson fumed. From the window, I watched them form a line and trudge toward the swamp. The day was overcast, the sky threatening more rain. My mother hovered in the living room, biting her nails. We turned on the local radio station, but there was nothing about a monster hunt, just the usual country songs and weather updates. Hours crawled by. The sun dipped westward, painting the sky in dusty gold, then orange. Still no sign of the men. Finally, as night approached, I heard shouting outside. I rushed to the door. My father, Mr. Thompson, and the others were returning. Their faces were grim. Some looked ill. They carried no trophies, no bagged alligator, no proof of a kill. My father's expression said it all. The hunt had gone badly. He stepped onto the porch, breathing hard. My mother demanded answers, but he just shook his head. We found tracks. Great big handprints in the mud. Followed them deeper into the forest. Then we heard it, a roar or something. We fired shots, but we didn't see it clearly. It was too fast, moving through the water. Deputy Brown nearly got pulled in. Something latched onto his leg, tried to drag him under. We had to cut him free. The poor man's in shock. I saw the deputy sitting in the back of Mr. Thompson's truck, panting, one pant leg torn and muddy. A paramedic was on the way, or so they said. Mr. Thompson shook his head, voice trembling. "That thing, it's not natural. We're not dealing with a normal animal." My father's gaze shifted to me. He opened his mouth to speak, then thought better of it. I realized he was recalling the diary, the decades of rumors. Everyone else in the group seemed too rattled to question further. Soon they dispersed back to their homes, muttering about the next steps. My father, exhausted, sank into a kitchen chair. My mother tried to comfort him, but he just shook his head, silent. That evening was suffocatingly still. No breeze, no chirping insects, nothing but an oppressive hush. Even the frogs seemed to sense the tension, going quiet as night fell. My father loaded his shotgun, placing it on the living room table. My mother pulled all the curtains shut. I sat at the window in my room, peeking out through a gap. The pond lay still and dark under a cloudy sky. Shortly after midnight, the silence shattered. A series of deep rolling bubbles echoed from the pond, like a pot boiling over. I raced downstairs, where my parents were already standing by the back window, adrenaline coursing through them. Glub, glub, glub. The water churned in the moonlight, though the moon's glow was faint behind the clouds. Then came a rumble, a subaquatic roar that rattled my bones. My mother backed away, whimpering. My father grabbed his shotgun. "I won't let it come near us," he snarled. Through the window, I saw swirling movement in the pond's center, circles forming, ripples spreading. Something large was rising. My father flung the back door open, ignoring my mother's protests, and aimed the flashlight out. For a moment, all we could see was the rippling water. Then slowly a shape emerged. First, I saw a massive, slimy limb arm or appendage, ridged with black, dripping with algae. It slammed against the bank, pulling the rest of the creature forward. The flashlight caught the glint of pale eyes, if they were eyes at all, deep in a shapeless mass that might have been a head. Slime and mud slid off it in ropes. My father fired. The shotgun blast roared. The creature let out a deafening shriek, a guttural note that made my vision waver. It recoiled, but then advanced again, as if enraged. Another shot. This time, I saw clumps of black flesh tear away. A foul stench filled the air, making me gag. Yet it kept coming. A giant dripping hand slapped onto the bank, claws sinking into the mud. Its torso heaved up, revealing a slick hide that pulsed with each breath. My father fired again and again, emptying the shotgun. Steam or smoke rose where the shells struck. The beast howled in pain, but it still dragged itself forward, half out of the water. My mother screamed, pulling me back. I thought of the diary. my grandfather's frantic accounts of shooting at it to no avail. They never truly killed it, I realized, stomach twisting. They just drove it away for a time. My father's gun clicked empty. The creature let out a hiss, lurching nearer, its claws tearing up clods of mud. We retreated inside, slamming the door, locking it. My mother dragged furniture to block the entrance. I heard the porch boards groan under the beast's weight. The house seemed to tremble. Then abruptly the thrashing outside quieted. I peered out the window, heart pounding. The shape retreated, dragging its wounded mass back into the pond. It disappeared beneath the surface with a final glub. The water churned violently, then stilled. Silence returned, broken only by our ragged breathing. We exchanged stunned looks. My father's face was pale, sweat dripping from his brow. He swallowed, voice shaking. It's still alive. But we hurt it. Maybe we can drive it away for good. My mother looked unconvinced. And if it comes back? I didn't have an answer. None of us did. With dawn came a grim resolution. We couldn't keep living in terror, waiting for it to strike. My father decided we had two options: abandon the farm or attempt to kill the creature once and for all. As much as he loathed to lose the property, survival took precedence. We'll try one more hunt, he told me and my mother at breakfast, his voice hollow. But this time, we'll be prepared with more than just shotguns. He contacted Mr. Thompson, who was equally desperate. They rallied a few of the more courageous neighbors. The deputy, now with bandaged leg, refused to join but sent word to the sheriff's office. No official help arrived. It was up to us. That afternoon, under a blazing sun, a group of 6 men, including my father and Mr. Thompson, assembled near the pond with rifles, gasoline cans, ropes, and homemade explosives, rigged from old dynamite sticks left in a barn. My mother and I watched from a distance, hearts in our throats. The plan was to flush the beast out of the water with a gasoline fire, essentially igniting the surface of the swamp, forcing it to emerge. Then, while it was disoriented, they'd shoot it or detonate the explosives. It sounded crazy and dangerous, but they saw no other way. Standing behind a makeshift barricade of logs, the men poured gasoline along the water's edge. The fumes made me dizzy even from yards away. When everything was set, Mr. Thompson lit a rag stuffed in a bottle of gasoline and tossed it onto the pond's surface. With a whoosh, flames danced across the water, sending black smoke into the sky. For a moment, nothing happened except the roar of the fire. Then a ripple spread outward, growing into violent waves. A horrible moan welled up, muffled under the water. The men steadied their guns. "Here it comes!" my father shouted. The pond exploded in a plume of water and slime. The creature erupted from the surface, half its body on fire, thick hides sizzling. It let out a scream so piercing I felt it in my bones. My father and the others unleashed a hail of bullets. The beast convulsed, flailing giant arms, extinguishing some of the flames under the water, but it was clearly in agony. Chunks of black flesh tore away, revealing a glistening interior that pulsed with dark fluid. Mr. Thompson signaled. One of the men lit the fuse on a homemade explosive and hurled it toward the beast. It landed near its flank, sputtering sparks. At that moment, the creature lunged forward, sweeping its massive arm across the water. The wave extinguished the fuse just before it detonated. "Damn it!" Mr. Thompson cursed. The beast slammed into the bank, roaring with fury. 2 of the men scrambled back, but one stumbled into the shallows. Immediately, a slick black hand snatched him, claws digging into his shoulder. He screamed, rifle dropping. My father and the others fired desperately at the creature's arm, eventually forcing it to release the man, who scrambled away, bleeding heavily. In the chaos, Mr. Thompson found the second explosive. He jammed a lit fuse into it, set the timer short, and hurled it at the beast's open maw, where I saw rows of stumpy blackish teeth glistening. By sheer luck, it landed near the creature's shoulder, lodging in that pulsing mass. Seconds later, an ear-splitting explosion rocked the swamp. The beast's chest erupted in a spray of black gore. It shrieked and bucked wildly, half of its torso shredded, then collapsed into the water, sending a tidal wave across the bank. My father and the men staggered back, coughing from smoke and sulfur. The creature's form slid under the surface, leaving a whirlpool of black blood. For a few seconds it thrashed beneath the water, and then all was still. The flames on the pond died down, leaving a patchwork of smouldering reeds and greasy slicks. We held our breath, waiting for it to rise again, to strike. But the water remained calm. Gradually, the black swirl dissipated, drifting into the reeds. The men approached cautiously, guns raised, scanning the surface for any sign of life. Nothing. No bubble. No movement. "It's dead," Mr. Thompson said softly, though his voice shook. We got it." My father exhaled a long, shuddering breath. I saw relief and horror on his face, all tangled. They stumbled back to the yard, some supporting the wounded man who groaned with pain. An ambulance would be needed, but at least they weren't all dead. The beast was gone, or so it seemed. Within an hour, the local sheriff finally arrived, alerted by frantic phone calls. He took one look at the carnage and stank of burned swamp and demanded answers. The men gave a halting explanation. Some giant creature attacked us, maybe a mutated gator or some freak of nature. The sheriff looked unconvinced, but with the wounded man lying there and the evidence of huge claw marks in the mud, he realized something truly violent had happened. Officially, it might end up labeled as accidental explosion while dealing with dangerous wildlife. My family packed our essentials that night. My mother wouldn't hear of staying another day. My father, still in shock from the confrontation, finally agreed. As for me, I felt torn. Part of me relieved the creature was presumably dead. Part of me still anxious about what might remain hidden in that labyrinth of water and mud. Before we drove away at dawn, I took one last look at the pond. Fire-scorched reeds ringed the water's edge, and an oily film coated the surface. My father had found bits of black flesh, which we quickly buried. A putrid smell lingered, heavy in the humid air. If something was left alive in that swamp, it was severely wounded, perhaps enough to die. But a nagging voice in my mind whispered, "What if it can heal? What if it spawns?" I clutched my grandfather's diary, its final page echoing in my head. Giant hands, slick and black. If I disappear, it got me too. He had survived, but only by the thinnest margin of luck or circumstance. Now we too were escaping. We had faced the beast and emerged battered but alive. As our truck pulled away from Gable Marsh, I watched the silhouette of the sinking forest vanish behind a curtain of cypress. A swirl of guilt and dread churned in my gut. We might have killed the monster, or perhaps just driven it further into the swamp. Either way, we couldn't stay. Months later, we had resettled in a smaller house back in the city. My father found an office job, and my mother seemed happier without the gloom of the marsh weighing on her. But none of us spoke much about what happened. Whenever we turned on the local news, we scanned for mention of bizarre sightings or more missing livestock near Gable Marsh. For a while, there was nothing. Then, in early spring, we heard a rumor, just a snippet from a friend of a friend, about a fisherman who vanished near the sinking forest. "Must have drowned," the article said. But I couldn't help remembering the bubbles, the swirling water, the monstrous black hands. What if it's not dead after all? A voice in my mind repeated. What if it's still in there, deeper in the swamp, nursing its wounds, waiting? Late at night, I sometimes dream of that final confrontation. In my nightmares, the creature rips through the surface, unstoppable, black claws reaching for me. I wake sweating, gasping for breath. The rational part of me says it's gone, destroyed. But the part that read my grandfather's diary, that saw what he saw, that part knows nature is resilient. Dark, ancient things can linger hidden in murky waters beyond our reach. I still keep the diary. Its last line resonates every time I think of Gable Marsh. My grandfather's words, scribbled in fear, ended with no resolution. He faced the beast, survived for decades, but never truly found closure. Nor have I. Perhaps some horrors can't be fully extinguished, only driven back into the depths they call home. So if you ever find yourself in that corner of the country near the sinking forest, be wary of the ponds and swamps. If you hear deep, bubbling noises or see unnatural ripples on the water's surface, think twice before you investigate. Some local legends are more than stories. Some nightmares lurk just beneath the surface, waiting patiently for the right moment to reach up with giant hands, slick and black, and pull you into the roiling depths, leaving nothing behind but cold, bubbling water.